going to talk about Codex Alimentarius. And before I introduce entirely Scott tips, I would like to say a few words, especially to the Danes in this room. I don't know how many of you have ever heard about Codex Alimentarius. Can you? Yes, thank you. Not that, well, many, but not that many. Codex Alimentarius is a Latin word, and it means the food code. It's an organization, I would say just before, Denmark is a very serious, active member of Codex Alimentarius since 1963. And actually Denmark has, in fact, helped to create this world organization all the way back already in '61. The first Codex Alimentarius meeting happened in Rome in '63. Codex is an international world organization under the United Nations. Denmark was also actively participating in the creation of the United Nations after World War II. Codex Alimentarius is under the Food and Agriculture Organization and WHO. Codex is, of course, working tightly with EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, and of course the FDA, the US Food and Drug Administration. Both FDA and EFSA joined force in 2007. Therefore, what is happening in the US has directly consequences on us in Europe. It is strange to witness how nearly no Danes have ever heard the word Codex Alimentarius before. It is shocking in a way, because Denmark has currently, since 2008, the vice chairman post of this huge world organization, and his name is Knud Østergaard, just behind the Indian new elected chairman, Samjay Dave. The goal of Codex Alimentarius Commission is to quote, "The Commission major goals are to protect the health of consumers and ensure fair practices in the international food trade. The Codex Alimentarius is recognized by the World Trade Organization as an international reference point for the resolution of disputes concerning food safety and consumer protection." In other words, Codex goal is to harmonize, to control, to globalize, to create international guidelines with everything related to food. Production, import, export, food labeling, pesticides, food safety, even veterinary and animal food production, and so forth. So it's all about what we eat every day. Today, there are 150 countries who are member actively in the Codex. The last number I checked, I don't know if it's true, maybe. And there's one member organization, and that the EU. Please note that the EU countries are one by one, not one by one, but as a whole, the EU. Meetings are constantly happening all over the world, and thousands of people are involved. So back to Scott's tips. We are very lucky to have Scott's tips today with us. He has first-hand experience due to his job, as well as a vast knowledge about Codex. He's born in Texas, studied at Berkeley University, California, licensed attorney, and he's a very much respected activist. Scott Tibbs is the president of the National Health Federation, which was created in 1955, and he's the president since 2007. The National Health Federation is the only non-governmental organization accredited by Codex Alimentarius to attend and to speak out at the meeting of the Codex Commission all over the world. He is hardworking to prevent Codex attempt to restrict our food freedom, especially lately with vitamins and minerals. The National Health Federation has fortunately had several successes. In Denmark, we have Mayday organization, which is doing its best to enlighten the Danish people about the role of Codex Alimentarius in our life. Actually, the Mayday representative, Mads Vedel Ibsen, is one of the organizers of the conference. So now, a nice warm welcome to Scott Tibbs.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Well, thank you, Carol, for that introduction. In fact, it was so thorough that I don't think I really need to give my speech anymore. Are there any questions? Does anyone have questions? Because I think that explains Codex thoroughly. Well, welcome. You all are very special for being here. And the reason is because you've gotten out of your comfort zone. And what I've found is people who get out of their comfort zone, they get to where the magic happens. And that's what we hope to do throughout this whole weekend with this conference, but certainly to the extent I can help take you there, it'll be during this speech. But I think you'll find with some of the other speakers, it will take you out of your comfort zone to areas where it might make you worried or concerned, but at least you'll be informed and you'll know how to take action, or at least look in the direction of where you can take action. So as we go through this today, think about where the magic happens and realize in doing that, one of the things that holds you back from and wants to put you in your comfort zone is the government and the handmaidens of the government, the people that work arm in arm with the government, because what they're doing is they are threatening your ability to take natural substances and maintain your health. And it doesn't just happen because of the big corporations. I know it's real typical for people these days to blame the big corporations like Monsanto and G.D. Searle and those others, and yes, they are to blame. But they can't do it on their own. They can't force you to buy their products. They do it by working hand in glove with the government, with the very agencies that are meant to protect you. And that's why substances like dietary supplements in the US, certainly, they've already long been attacked here in Denmark. Denmark's one of the harshest, as you know. But this is just representative of the threat that faces us. But who is that threat? You know, we think of the government as being omnipotent, as being so powerful, and it is in many respects. But as William Graham Sumner, an American, said once, the state is only an obscure clerk hidden in some corner of a government bureau. So if you start thinking about them that way, and that they put on their pants one leg at a time, just like the rest of us, that you will see that they really aren't that powerful. They aren't that omnipotent. We have a tendency to think they are because they've got the guns and the prisons, and we don't. But they're basically incompetent because they have no true feedback mechanism to give them the proper information on how to take action. That's why you really can't count on government for anything, because they don't have the proper mechanism to respond to our needs. They don't have the constant feedback. You know, when you go to a store and buy something, when you go not decide to buy something, you're making a decision, and you think that that's 1 billion decisions every day, and probably every hour in Denmark alone. And this is a vote, this is the true democracy. This is where you're deciding to spend your hard-earned money. And that gives the feedback mechanism to say whether someone should offer the product or not offer the product or anything of that sort. And when the government interferes with that very natural, very organic mechanism, they're causing dislocations that cause all sorts of problems. Now, think about that concept applied to natural products, and you'll see how it affects your health. It affects your health every single day. For example, are you getting enough vitamin D? There are 2 basic forms of vitamin D. There are actually more, but one is D2, which is the synthetic. The other is D3. And the one, the chemical structure shown on this lady's T-shirt is the D3 form, and that's a natural form. And for decades, they thought all you needed was 400 international units a day of vitamin D to keep you healthy. Well, if you live in a country that's a high latitude country like Denmark, you are probably only making vitamin D in your skin during the month of July. I don't care if you're a nudist and you don't wear any clothes, you're out in the sun in January, February, March, you aren't getting vitamin D produced in your skin because, or if you are, very little, because the sun at that time is coming at such an angle to the atmosphere, it has to punch through about twice as much atmosphere before it reaches the surface of your skin. And by then, the vitamin D producing rays have been filtered out. So the only real time in Denmark is July, give or take 2 weeks either side of July. And if you go out and don't wear a lot of clothes, and besides, in the wintertime, you're bundled up against the cold anyway. You're lucky to show maybe your face to the sun. So for people to get enough adequate levels of vitamin D, especially if they're dark-skinned, it's even worse because it takes them 10 times as long to produce that D in their skin as a very fair-complected person. Then you really need to supplement with vitamin D. And what they found is they found that instead of 400 IUs a day, which the government for decades and the officials for decades said, oh, this is adequate, they found you really need 10 times more. Did you ever think about why the flu season occurs in January, February of each year? I mean, sometimes you get like a summer flu, but why does it occur in the winter? It's because you've built up some stores of vitamin D in your system, and then by September they're a little bit lower, by October lower still, November even lower, by December probably all gone. And then you're vulnerable to flu attacks, you're vulnerable to cancer because D is so ubiquitously necessary in your body that it's important for preventing cancer, it's important for preventing you from having viral attacks, and you need basically about 10 times more. I take 5,000 international units a day, which sounds like a lot when you compare it to the 400, but the fact of the matter is that I should probably even be taking more than that because 5,000 international units is only 1/8 of a milligram. It sounds like a lot, and our previous speaker did a great job of, Rasmus, of telling how you shouldn't take too much of anything. And so some people will think, oh, then am I not taking too much of this vitamin? But the fact is that they've been looking at vitamins at such a low level that the norm is really much higher. So when I tell you you should be taking 5,000 units a day, then that's really the norm. If you're talking about high doses, there are people that take 50,000 a day. When I got the flu once, because I had only been taking 2,000 units a day, and I thought that was enough at the time, and I sort of tottered on the edge of being sick. Like for 5 days, I was kind of, and then the 5th day, I was so sick that for the first time in decades, I couldn't even work. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, maybe this is the time to break out that bottle of 50,000 IU. You know, this is 10 times what I take now, 50,000 IU capsules. So I took it out, I opened it up, I took one, and by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I was well enough to work. Not 100%, but 98%, just from that one capsule. So this can radically help your system because it turns your immune system into a smarter immune system. And that's what you need these days to fight off all the bad guys that are attacking your system, all the toxins that we encounter, the poor diet, and the like. Now, on the opposite side of the vitamin D benefit is iron. And we all think we need iron, right? Most of us think we need iron. Well, if you're a young boy, young girl growing up, you haven't reached maturity yet, you definitely need iron. If you're a woman who's still fertile and having periods, you definitely need iron. Everyone else, you don't. This difference, because iron is a very, it's like a pro-oxidant in your body. That's why in the hemoglobin molecule, when you see it, it's so tightly wrapped up by the rest of the molecule to protect it from interacting with the rest of your body and basically rusting you from the inside out. And this reason and the fact that men don't have periods, so we're accumulating iron at a greater rate, probably accounts for 80% of the difference in lifespan between men and women. Because by the time a man is 50 years old, he probably has approximately 3 times as much iron in his body as a woman does. And what they've noticed is when a woman reaches menopause, stops having those monthly periods that gets rid of the excess iron, and stops having the babies that get rid of the excess minerals, then she starts rapidly catching up with men in rates of heart attack and rates of cancer. And this is the only thing that accounts for this sort of difference, is this theory about the iron theory of aging. And men need to be very careful. So just some practical suggestions, and women, menopausal women. Practical suggestions. If you eat red meat, then you want to drink a glass of red wine with that red meat, because it will block the uptake of the iron 130%. In other words, it'll actually chelate out the iron from your system. But the wine has to be freshly opened. It could have been bottled for 100 years. It doesn't matter. But the polyphenols will evaporate out of the bottle within 24 hours. Unless you put it in the refrigerator, then it'll last about 3 days. Or if you have one of those nitrogen, suck out the oxygen kind of things. But basically, red wine, will help you chelate out the excess iron. Now, on the other hand, if you drink beer with red meat, you're increasing the absorption. If you take vitamin C with red meat, you're increasing the absorption. If you drink black tea, you decrease the absorption. So this is something you all need to be aware of and take care of. Now, it makes it sound like supplements are dangerous things, but they really aren't. Let me show you this chart. And I know you can't read the letters that are up there or the words that are up there, so I'll read them for you. This is a chart that was prepared in Canada. And it's basically saying up here, the risk of dying relative to being killed on a Boeing 747 flight. So they just use that as a mean. And right here, this is where the Boeing 747 flight is. Now, there's a whole bunch of scales up here of different things and dangers. Here's horse riding. This is the danger of dying from riding a horse. But what's the topmost one? The topmost one is associated with medical care in a properly licensed hospital. That is your most dangerous risk of dying, is if you go into a hospital, believe it or not. The next one is smoking, and just a quick aside, totally off topic, but I'm dying to tell you this, is our previous speaker said this about asbestos and how biopersistent it is. I used to, in the 80s, handle asbestos cases, and one of the things we noticed is that smokers kill off the little hairs in the throat, the cilia. And so the reason they were getting asbestosis and not the non-smokers, at least at a very different rate, was because non-smokers are able to wash up from their lungs with those little hairs going up, and then you expectorate it out, spit it out essentially, or swallow it and you get rid of the toxin that's in your lungs. In this case, it could be nanotubes or whatever they are. But smokers don't have that because they've killed off the hairs. They've killed off the mucus elevator, it's called, that bring stuff out of your lungs. So if you're a smoker, and I noticed some out there earlier, then you want to be very careful of this to try to cut down or avoid it. Anyway, that was a complete diversion, but I was dying to tell you. Anyway, so the school bus accidents are there. So what's the lowest risk? The lowest risk is you're here in Skanderborg and you're walking on the street, and lo and behold, a meteorite streaks out of the sky and hits you on the head and kills you. So God forbid that that happens, but that's your lowest risk on this chart. Okay, I'm going to skip over the second lowest risk. The third lowest risk is you're going outside and a bee stings you and you're allergic and you die. And the fourth lowest risk is you get hit by a bolt of lightning and you're gone. So I skipped over the second lowest risk. Would you care to guess what that is? That's taking supplements. So it's safer than being hit by lightning, or the risk of being hit by lightning. It's safer than a bee sting. Certainly safer than riding a horse. Certainly safer than riding in a school bus. The only thing that it's more dangerous than is being hit by a meteorite as you're walking down the street. Now, throughout my talk, I want you to keep this chart in mind because this is super important. You see all these people, the Danish government, the American government, the EU government, they want to protect you from this dangerous thing called a vitamin. They want to protect you from this dangerous thing called a mineral. And all these herbs and other dietary supplements. They're spending billions of dollars to protect you from something that is basically inherently safe. It is absolutely incredible. So you think about the cost-benefit analysis of what they could be doing. Why aren't they spending all those billions of dollars up there on that danger, or on the doctors here who are killing people off right and left? Why aren't they spending money there? So it's absolutely ridiculous for them to spend this kind of time, when the conventional approach, that's what actually kills people. So in the US, and these are US figures, you have 800,000 deaths a year from doctors, 120,000 deaths a year from drugs, and even 5,000 deaths a year from food. So this is where the money and the effort should be put, if the government is to put any effort into any of it. Usually, I have this theory, although it's not actually my theory, which is the more effort a government puts into something, the worse the problem becomes. You know, witness in the US the war on drugs from the 1970s. Well, now there are more drugs than ever. The war on cancer from the 1970s. Well, now there's more cancer than ever. They think they are curing cancer, and they tell you that they are. Look at our cure rate. And what they do is they say, look, now people are living longer. But when you think about it, it's really false what they're telling you. Because, say, people discovered that they were dying, or had cancer, here, and then their death is here. Now with early discovery, what are they doing? Are they extending the lifespan? No. They're finding it out earlier, so then they can say, oh, instead of 5 years, 7 years now. Do you see what they've done? They've just shifted the discovery date to earlier. You still had cancer, but now they can say 7 years. So look what we're doing. We're wonderful. So instead what you have natural remedies that work. You have GCMAF, and in earlier talks that I've given throughout the years, I talk a lot about GCMAF, but I won't dwell on it here because I don't have the time. But this is a glycoprotein. It's a macrophage activating factor. And basically it hypes up your immune system. It helps defeat cancer because cancer cells exude this enzyme called nagalase, and that's how they're able to survive. So, you know, you have two immune systems. You have the innate system, you have the acquired immune system, and the stronger one is your innate system. Those are the macrophages. They're first responders to appear on the scene at the time of an assault or an invasion. And what happens is the nagalase from the cancer cells inactivates those. And these weekly injections of GCMAF, which you can get from a company in the Netherlands, as a matter of fact, just Google it online. It's like sending reinforcements of the army into battle, and it overwhelms the nagalase and it kills the cancer. Usually they've had 100% cure rate, and depends especially good on prostate cancer and on breast cancer. But they've also had success with colon cancer. Not large numbers, and it's not a new thing. They've been studying this for 20 years now, this year. You also have ionic silver for flu and other viruses. And personally, I don't think ionic silver or colloidal silver is a danger. I think it's a benefit. You just have to take it a certain way and not take too much, and it works like a charm. Selenium for AIDS and viruses. They found, for example, men who were taking 200 micrograms of selenium a day had half the HIV infection rate as those men who were not. And it's very clear. So if you don't want to take a supplement of selenium, which is tough to do anyway here in Denmark because they want to protect you from yourself. So they make supplements very hard to get here, and what you can get are very low potency, whether it's vitamin D, selenium, or whatever. But if you eat, I don't know what it's called in Danish, but we call it a Brazil nut, that's about 150 to 200 micrograms of selenium. The soil in Denmark is very selenium poor. If you try to eat a normal diet here, and I'm about to break Danish law, excuse me, you won't get enough selenium in your diet. So it's very important for you to eat like a Brazil nut a day or to take a supplement, because selenium will help protect you from viruses. It will help protect you from cancer. And the cancer rate for breast cancer is markedly reduced if you take selenium. And then, of course, I already spoke about natural vitamin D. Make sure it's D3, not D2, and make sure you get adequate levels. Magnesium and omega-3s, you know, fish oils are good for depression. And then resveratrol is especially good for longevity and antiviral. But you don't want to take too much. The action curve on resveratrol is like a J-shaped curve, and they found that the maximum benefit is around 100 milligrams a day. So you want to take about 100 milligrams. You don't want to overdo it. And then here in Denmark, there's a product that I became familiar with called Life Spice, and it's very strongly anti-cancer. I think they're based in, you can Google it, Life Spice, and it's actually a combination of American Indian herbs and European herbs that the discoverer, inventor found worked on animals like horses and the like, and it was making them well. And she adapted it to, the Jorgensens adapted it to humans, and now you can get it in liquid form and tablet form, and it's right here sold throughout Denmark. I highly recommend it. Great product. But what we found is a lot of these products and a lot of these people, and there's some in our audience, have been suppressed. You know, they try to speak the truth, and they take them off air or whatever they do. And for cancer, they say it's only about, at least in the States, you can only lawfully say that you can either cut it out through surgery, poison it through chemotherapy, or burn it with radiation treatment. The competition is banned, and how do they do that? Using government's coercive powers. They don't do it because you're forced only to go to a certain hospital. It's because they ban all the other alternatives, or at least make them harder to get and more expensive to get. And they do this through government agencies, captured agencies. You know, we think that the Danish Food and Veterinary Administration is supposed to be working for the people, right? The citizens, the ones who pay their salaries, or the US FDA, right? Well, the fact of the matter is, when you think about it, it's all about money and time. You know, what percentage of our lives is the Danish FDA? A very small percent. We have families, we have school, we have work, we have vacations, maybe we have our own hobbies and side projects. It's a small percent of our focus. But for a drug company, what do you think the focus is? If they don't get that drug approved, they could go out of business, or at least it'll affect the bottom line of their profits. So they have, maybe this is better, they have a huge incentive to go and lobby. And in the US, the drug companies spend $6 million a day lobbying, or maybe they use kroners here, lobbying the FDA in the halls of Congress. So this is something that we're hard to put up against. And so don't expect that the FDA, whether it's Danish, American, or whatever, will represent your interests. It won't. And then what happens is this too loud or is this better? It's too loud, better? I hear both. Yeah, I don't know. I hit it accidentally when I was, how's that? A little better? Okay, thank you. So what they do is they work hand in glove with the media, the mainstream media, what I call the lamestream media. And they put out publications, and like this one. So this is Reader's Digest in the US, supposed to be a family publication. And what do? They put these scare articles about vitamins will kill you. And by the way, out of the 10 vitamins they talked about in this issue, which came out 2 years ago in April, they didn't say anything bad about vitamin D, interestingly enough, but everything else they trashed. But when I bought this copy, because I wanted to read the article, see what it said, I picked it up, I turned it around, and what did it say? Well, they had an ad for a drug, big ad for a drug, and you leaf through the magazine, there are all these drug ads and the like. So who's telling them what to say? What do you guess? The advertisers. So you have to think about what they're doing, and then the type of information they give us, you know, that they want us to have is kind of mostly stupid information anyway, like they'll put this out. And we're supposed to think, you know, oh, be impressed with this kind of headline. Or this one, statistics show that teen pregnancy drops off significantly after age 25. Or this one, starvation can lead to health hazards. These are real headlines. And this one, miracle cure kills 5th patient. I especially like this one. This is like, yeah, this came out through the Associated Press even. So this is the kind of disinformation we get and misinformation and sort of childish information. So you have to, that's why I'm so appreciative of all of you, because you come to conferences like this, and I'm sure you look through the internet and you get the real information that you need to stay healthy and live a long time. So the basic truth is government agencies don't work for you. They work against you. They work for commercial interests. They're a tool not for protecting you, but for eliminating competition. The only way you can get them to do something beneficial is through very intense and concentrated public pressure, shining a lot of light on them. And that's what, so keep this basic truth in mind and you won't be misled. So what do we have? Finally, I get to Codex, but you know, Carol already told you about Codex. This is the ultimate prize to capture. Instead of having to go to all these countries around the world and capture each country's individual FDA, they can capture Codex Alimentarius, an international body, as Carol said, that was created in the early 1960s. And it was meant to harmonize and standardize international food regulations. And it actually has two noble goals. The noble goals are to protect the consumer and to eliminate international barriers to trade in food. Well, I agree with that. It's just, how is it being implemented? The stated goal versus the actual goal. Because again, in my opinion, and I've been to probably more, in fact, I know I have more Codex meetings than any other health freedom activist. This is their actual goal, is not the noble one, because they've been captured by interests like Monsanto and all these commercial interests. So let's see, it's elitist, it's a top-down driven agenda. It's very anti-natural foods and supplements. See, when I think about natural things in the free market, I think of organic processes that flow naturally. It's not perfect. No one says that any of those are perfect. There are natural products that will hurt you. There are natural products that won't help you, because everyone's a unique individual. You need to see what works for you. But you're more likely than not to be benefited through this modality than by anything else. The Codex is very pro-drug, all about control, and it's creakingly slow to react to change. By the time they adopt a standard or a guideline, after they have this 8-step process, the knowledge has changed. You know, with the doubling time of knowledge, which is geometric, actually logarithmic, it's going up like this. So that's part of the theory, by the way, about living longer. You don't find the cure that lets you live a quality life and makes you live 500 years or 200 years. You just want to live 10 years longer. And if you do, then you'll catch that curve for when they make the next discovery that allows you to live longer with a quality life like that. But what happens in Codex is their standards get set in stone with old technology. It's like they're adopting the standards for gas lighting, and we're already doing electric lighting. That's the way it works there, and it's hard to go back and change it. This is the building where the Codex Commission meets every other year. Then they meet in Geneva on alternating years. This is the FAO headquarters, the Food and Agriculture Organization. And I was at the meeting in July 2009 there, and then I was just there last July as well. So what you have is you have the Codex Alimentarius Commission, and then you have some 27 committees underneath it, all hosted by various governments. Like the Committee on Nutrition is hosted by the German government. I'll be going to that meeting in December, and they'll be dealing with some nutrition issues that are very critical that I'll tell you about in a moment. The Natural Mineral Waters Committee, the Swiss government hosts it, and so on. The Danish government doesn't host any of the committees, but as Carol already let you know, they're very prominently vocal in all these meetings, usually pretty anti-freedom, by the way. Underneath the committees, there are what are known as working groups, both electronic working groups, working groups, or the physical working groups. And what I've seen is over the years, and I've been going to the meetings since the year 2000, but NHF actually was attending before me, but not with the status of accreditation. So we just sent a reporter that would go and report on the meetings. Actually, any one of you in the room can go to a Codex meeting. You just can't participate in it. You sit in the public gallery section and you can observe. You just have to give them notice and you can go. And you can go to the website, which is codexalimentarius.net, to see what the next meetings are. The Codex members are the country delegates, which are basically unelected bureaucrats from Albania to Zimbabwe, literally, and all in between. And then, as Carol mentioned, the European Union countries, they will attend, but they have no real voice there except through the EU representative. And whichever EU representative it is depends upon which committee that they're attending. Then behind them are the INGOs, the International Non-Governmental Organizations. And these are 98%, these are trade groups. The World Sugar Research Organization, the International Dairy Federation, groups like that, little Monsanto front groups, the GD Searle, aspartame people, they all are there. The vet drug people, like the ractopamine people, and they all have these great names, which frankly I've blocked out of my mind, but like, the Welfare for Animals Association or something, and actually it's just the exact opposite. And then you have the Codex staff. And I know it's typical for many in the health freedom movement to trash Codex kind of monolithically, but believe it or not, there are a lot of supporters there, people behind the scenes, on the staff of Codex, or in some of these delegations who are actually very pro-health freedom. Most are not, but most have this regulatory mindset, kind of like, I have a hammer, so everything's a nail, so I'm going to nail it down. And so they have that kind of mentality, but when you open their eyes, I've found some of them are actually quite concerned about doing good things. They just don't know how to do it. They don't have the tools, they don't have the philosophical grounding to realize that most people are, all people are going to be better off health-wise living in freedom than in control. And I could tell you stories about that to give examples, but again, we only have an hour here. Now, this is inside that building I showed you earlier. It's actually not a very good photo. I hate this meeting hall because the INGOs don't have their own microphone like we do at the other meetings. But here at the dais, you have the Codex, like the chairman and the vice chairman and vice chairwomen, and et cetera, and you have the FAO representative, the WHO representative, And then here are the delegates, you know, and they go alphabetically. This gentleman with the circle around him isn't like an angel or something. He's the chairman, former chairman of the Codex Committee on Nutrition and Foods for Special Dietary Uses, Rolf Grossklaus, who actually was my arch enemy, and I had many a bitter argument with him for years, all the 2000s, with this gentleman. But actually, I have to compliment him, and I'll do that later, because he did a great service for health freedom his last meeting. I'll save that for later. Anyway, the science, that these standards and guidelines that Codex are developing, they're based upon, in my opinion, junk science. You know, science, people think science is objective, certainly on the political level, but it's not. It's all about politics. It's all about, let's get this study in, ignore these other studies, let's cobble together a study that looks good, and we'll pass that off as science. It's all political, and especially at the Codex level. But the problem is that most of the Codex delegates, the ones from the countries, the unelected bureaucrats, because they've been reared with this and educated, miseducated at college and high school, whatever, the whole level, into believing that whatever comes from government officials is like a word from the mouth of God, and you don't question it, that they accept it. And they literally genuflect at the altar of Codex, at Codex Science. So anything, and at the bottom here it says the FAO, WHO expert consultations, and it's also called the Joint Expert Committee on Food Additives. And this body, when they issue something, an opinion, no matter how biased, no matter how much science they've ignored, the delegates go, half of the delegates go, oh my God, we've got to accept it. It's like Moses came down from the Mount Sinai with the tablets, and here is what we need to accept. There are the 10 Commandments, and that's what they do. And that's hard to fight, very hard to fight. So what they're doing is creating these standards that are going to rule our lives, and already are in many respects. These vitamin, mineral, food supplement guidelines, the GM food labeling issue, aspartame and aluminum, which they've accepted because they think it's safe, melamine, which we fought, NHF fought at Codex, and we actually won what Carol alluded to when she was speaking. We won a good victory there, which I will share with you. So when we speak, and this is taken from the German meeting, because the Germans are very well organized at their Codex meetings, as you can imagine. They actually, when you're making a presentation, they'll show you on the screen, and next to you will be the text that you're talking about. And it's very nice as compared to the Italian meeting, where it's, you know, a little bit of organized chaos. So I like going to the German meetings, but here is what I was arguing about then. It was nutrient reference values. And, you know, I haven't been keeping track of time, so how much time do I have? 25, okay, and there will probably be some questions. But so this is something that we had a huge victory on. Now, what does this mean, nutrient reference values? It's what we would call in the US recommended daily allowance, RDI. When you look at a bottle of, I don't care what it is, orange juice, and you see on there vitamin C, 100%, and it'll say 60 milligrams. So, you know, a lot of you here are very sophisticated, I would assume, or you are not even here. So you know 60 milligrams is nothing in vitamin C. It's not hardly anything to take. It's certainly not 100% or shouldn't be of your RDA. I mean, you smoke one cigarette, and on average you're destroying 60 milligrams of vitamin C. Did you ever wonder why smokers get all this wrinkled skin later in life? Well, vitamin C is a very important constituent of collagen, which is the glue that holds your cells together. And when you're using up all that vitamin C through the destructive effect of the cigarette, then you're getting wrinkles, which makes me wonder why all these young women who smoke do it, because you'd think they'd be especially concerned about their appearance later in life. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic, and I won't go down that road. But so what they're doing here is they're trying to dumb down the RDAs, because most people will look at it. They'll look at that bottle of orange juice. They'll see the vitamin C. They'll say, hey, I'm getting 100%. They don't realize, like you or I would, that 60 milligrams is insignificant. So let's go party. You know, I did it. I can stay up all night. I can burn the candle at both ends. Let's go have fun. I got my 100% for the day. So for the bulk of the population, this is important. It's not important for me because I'll disregard it. It's not important maybe for you because you'll disregard it. But for most people, they won't. So what happened at this meeting in 2009, the Nutrition Committee meeting in Dusseldorf, Germany, is during a break, a coffee break, I saw this document, and they all have these sort of innocuous names, technocratic names. Like here it says, proposed draft, additional or revised nutrient reference values for labeling purposes in the Codex Guidelines on Nutrition Labeling. So I'm thumbing through this as I'm drinking some tea, and I notice that they decided that 60 milligrams of vitamin C was too much. So they want to reduce it to 45 milligrams. They want to reduce vitamin A from 800 micrograms to 550. Most of the B vitamins they want to lower. The calcium they want to, unfortunately, increase, and the magnesium decrease. Remember, magnesium, calcium are twin minerals. Most people, the typical Danish diet is very adequate, more than adequate in calcium, but inadequate in magnesium. And magnesium's the traffic cop that tells the calcium where to go. Without adequate levels of magnesium, you're going to get more heart attacks, not fewer. And that's why it's important to get enough magnesium, because then the calcium will go where it's not needed, which is in your arteries, and it will calcify in your arteries, and that's the cause of most blockages in the arteries is calcification, not cholesterol. Forget about cholesterol. Calcification. And in your skin where it makes wrinkles. And if you have magnesium and adequate levels of K2, which you get from eating green leafy vegetables, and boron, 3 milligrams a day, eat an apple a day, keeps the doctor away. Well, it's true, because there's 3 milligrams of boron in that. Then you'll have the calcium going where it belongs, in your teeth. Oh, I can't get close to my mouth or I touch this thing and I forget. In your teeth or in your bones, and that's where you want it. You don't want it in your skin, you don't want it in your arteries. Anyway, these idiots are increasing calcium and lowering magnesium, so they're having a very anti-health effect. So when I saw this, I went ballistic. And it's a good thing I didn't talk right away, but we went back in. It was the next item up on the agenda. And normally the countries, well, not normally, always, the countries are recognized by the chairman or the chairwoman first, and they get to speak. So here I thought, oh, I'll have 10 minutes to prepare my arguments because, all these countries are going to speak. And it was already at step 3 or 4, so it was already well along the line to being adopted. But the only country that spoke was Costa Rica, and they very meekly said, the Costa Rican delegate meekly said, Mr. Chairman, thank you. We think that the level for vitamin A should be left the same. Thank you, and sat down. Well, the way it works in Codex, they work by consensus. They don't actually vote. It's not really that democratic. But the chairman or the chairwoman will sit up here, and just like you would all be the delegates, will look around, see how many people spoke up. And if you don't speak out, then you might as well have not even attended the meeting because you'll count for nothing. But they'll say, oh, most people spoke up in favor of this standard, so we have consensus, we move it up the next step of the chain, up the ladder, towards the process of finally being adopted. And so at this time, only Costa Rica said something. So then the chairman called on me. Remember that gentleman with the halo around him? Well, that was the chairman at the time, his last meeting. Before he retired. Now it's chaired by another person named Pia Noble, and now I miss that guy. I hate to tell you, but that's how bad she is. But in any event, so it was my turn to speak, so I was stunned because, here I thought I was going to have all this time, but it also sent me a danger signal. It sent, no one's opposing this except for meek, mild Costa Rica, and they would have pushed it along if I didn't speak up. So I started out because I knew the chair was very concerned about PR, and I said, this is going to be a public relations nightmare for Codex. We will be the laughingstock of the world if we lower this. And I went into why they needed to be raised, the NRVs and so on. Then the Australian delegate kept arguing against me. And we argued back and forth for almost an hour, and some other country delegates argued against me. It's really NHF against the world, until finally the Iraqi delegate spoke up, and the Iraqi delegate said, oh, we support NHF's position. But I'm still arguing. And then finally, bless their hearts, the Indian delegation, the Indian delegate spoke up and said, we think this standard should be held back for further consideration, and we agree with the National Health Federation. Now at this point, there are only 2 countries and NHF speaking out against it, and the chairman and the chairwoman, they have a lot of power, because they can kind of decide what's consensus, what isn't. So this guy, who had been my arch enemy for 10 years, he, you know, God bless him, he said, we need to hold it back. There's enough opposition. So he actually held the standard back, and I was like stunned. It was like our big victory to hold this back from going forward. And with that, we killed the momentum, so that the next meeting in 2010, we had more allies on our side, including the European Union, actually. And then in the 2011 meeting, they issued a new FAO report on the subject, because they decided to kick it back to FAO because of all our opposition. They read the report, and I remember sitting in the meeting last year in Bad Soden in Germany, thinking, gosh, this is all because of us, that they're spending 300 delegates are spending all this time on this silly FAO report. So we got it delayed 3 years. And of course, as Winston Churchill said, victory's never final. So the next meeting in a couple of months is in early December, the first week of December, again in Bad Soden, Germany, which is near Frankfurt. I'll be going there with a delegation from NHF, and this is where they want to insert the numbers in based on the FAO report. So we have a huge battle up ahead, and we're preparing the written document now. We already did one in the spring. But if any of you are experts on any particular vitamins and would like to help us write part of our submission, that is arguing as to why the supplement levels should be higher for a particular vitamin, even if you just pick one, then please let me know, because we can use help. This is the building where the meeting was held in 2009. This is what it looked like in the room. And this was our delegation last year. That's me in the back and the ones with all the hair are the one in the front is Petra Weiss, who's head of NHF Germany, her mother, and this is Caroline Knight, who's head of NHF UK. So we'll have a very similar delegation this coming December. Then we had a victory in melamine. Melamine, as you may recall, is a contaminant, and I may skip over this, I don't know, I'm running out of time. But melamine is a contaminant that killed a lot of cats and dogs when some Chinese, very clever Chinese, found that by putting melamine, which is basically an industrial contaminant, by putting it in cat and dog food, they could trick the testing machines, which tested for nitrogen levels in cat and dog food, to test for what the protein would be, because it bumps up the protein level using, very cheap byproducts to do it, so they could kind of cheat the system. But unfortunately, it killed about 100,000 cats and dogs in Canada and the US before they caught it. Then they did it again with baby infant formula. The babies were hardier, and it only killed maybe 100 of them, but it sickened like almost 100,000 of them as well. Well, this is a man-made contaminant. It's not natural. It's carcinogenic. It's deadly. And our position at the Codex Committee on Contaminants in Food, which is hosted by the Dutch government, is that there should be zero tolerance. The EU says we'll allow 2.5 parts per million. And if you just look at this contaminant in isolation, they have an argument, to be honest. If you just, from the environment, only got melamine, your body could probably handle that amount. But as other speakers have pointed out, this isn't the only contaminant in the universe. There's ractopamine, there's melamine, there's xenoestrogens, there are PCBs, there's all sorts of things we're exposed to, diesel fumes, EMFs, you name it, we're being assaulted by it. So you don't look at these substances in isolation. And they wanted to have an exemption in infant baby formula for packaging. On the inside of those aseptic packages, they'll spray melamine on it because it makes a nice container packaging, very cheap. And frankly, very effective to keep the liquid from going outside the container. But the problem is melamine molecules migrate into the fruit juice that then the baby, or the formula that then the baby will consume. So they wanted an exemption so that no matter how much it was that migrated in there, even above this 2.5 parts per million, then that was okay. So what did we do? We argued against it, and we fought it for 3 years. It was going to go through, but because of NHF's opposition, we then had a coalition of mostly Central American and South American countries, these sort of Hispanic women that got together and said, we don't want that for our babies, and they supported us, and we beat it back until we totally eliminated the exemption. So we had another victory there. Then we came up with ractopamine. This is what you are not exposed to in Denmark, but if you travel to Canada or the US and you eat bacon there, or mini turkeys or whatever, or for that matter anywhere in the Americas in the Western Hemisphere, you're being dosed with ractopamine because they give it to animals. It has a steroid-like effect. It makes the meat less fatty and more muscular, and so they get more money for it. The breeders can make about $3, $5 per head. But the EU very sensibly says, just because you want to make animals look like Arnold Schwarzenegger doesn't mean you can have it in the EU, and they blocked it. And the EU and China and Russia and the NHF fought this, and Consumers International fought this very hard, year after year, and we were winning every year, but this last July we lost. Here is the Geneva meeting room where we were, and we had the ractopamine victories in 2010, 2011, and this is what I mean by victories never final. Here we won, and then last July, just 2 months ago, we lost. And this is at the, again, you'll recognize it, this is the meeting hall in Rome, Italy. The delegates are looking up at a screen taking pictures. If you can see over here on the far side, it's not that clear, is the voting screen. And we lost by 1 vote. Can you believe it? 1 vote. The US and Canada, Argentina and Brazil were particularly nasty at advancing this, and they trucked in every little 2-bit country you can imagine. They had the Kingdom of Tonga there. They had the country of Nevis and St. Kitts. And keep in mind, here Nevis and St. Kitts has a population of 53,000 people, sopping wet. If you throw water on them, they have 53,000 people, and they have the same voting right as China or India or these other, or the EU. And so, well, the EU votes with 27 member states, so they have 27 votes, but still, you have this happening. So what happened is when we lost on this, let me see, when we lost on this, 70% of the world's pork-consuming population basically lost to 30%. That's how off and non-democratic Codex is. And it was all forced on, so much so that forced on the rest of the delegation that, believe it or not, Switzerland even threatened to leave Codex. And so it still remains to be seen if it's going to break up Codex or not. And the EU delegate, the 2 delegates, Eva Zamora and Ella Strickland, worked very hard to fight this. And to their credit, the EU delegates really worked hard to protect you from ractopamine. And they announced when the decision was made on July 5th that ractopamine had won. If only 1 vote had switched sides, it wouldn't have won. The EU delegate announced, we don't care what the Codex standard is, the EU legislation will remain in place. But you have to be careful because Codex strategic plan, as they announce in their publication here, is to push it on a, you can't read that, maybe I can read it for you, is to say, I'll just abbreviate, the Commission will develop internationally agreed standards and related texts for use in domestic regulation and international trade in food. And I guarantee you the US and Brazil will bring trade challenges before the World Trade Organization against both the EU and China to crack open those markets and force them to accept ractopamine-doped meat. You know, this is a drug that they give to the animals 2 weeks before slaughter, and for it to have its effect, unlike other drugs, you have to have them eating it until the very last minute, or it doesn't have an effect. And there's 20% residue in there. Now, if we had had more support, you know, the NHF is just a, you know, it exists on contributions from people like you. We don't have big corporations giving us money. We don't accept money from the government. If we had had more resources, we might have been able to change that one vote, but unfortunately, it didn't happen. And what do you have here? You have the Danish food Gestapo, and you can see things getting worse. Now, these are a lot of words to read, but I'll just read them real quickly for you. You know, the Danish Food and Veterinary Administration now says, with this new supplement, dietary supplement legislation, that it can put people in prison for 2 years if they recommend taking dietary supplements in dosages that are higher than what the administration thinks reasonable. Oops, did I just violate Danish law? I don't know. Or if you tell others that a well-balanced and varied diet generally cannot provide enough nutrients. So, you know, I've known this for a long time, that the Danish FDA is very tough, and they go in and they'll, anything that threatens the medical mafia monopoly, they'll go in and take care of because they are captured. They don't really have your well-being and interest at heart. They have the commercial interest because, you know, think about it. When they get out of their job, where are they going to go? Oh, they'll go work for a drug company. Or the drug company sends someone to work for them. So what do you want to do? First of all, you have to realize that politicians don't see the light. They feel the heat. So you've got to be persistently vocal. Educate yourself, first of all, but then once educated, like at these kind of conferences, you need to be persistently vocal. What does that mean? That means don't just write a letter or an email to your representative. Call them up. Go down and see them. Not only see them alone, see them with family and friends. And just keep the heat on. Make them want to get rid of you, want to do what you want, just to leave you so you'll leave them alone. You know, look at the letters to the editors. If you see something that's anti-natural health, that's pro-drug, pro-GMO, all of that, write them back. Challenge, challenge, challenge. And join with others and act together. I mean, two organizations. The NHF is the world's oldest health freedom organization. We've been active on many fronts: water fluoridation, vaccines, and the like. And we have members in 20+ countries, and we're the only one with a seat at the Codex meeting. But we have had people like Mayday helping us with our work there in the past. And NHF is not in Denmark. I recommend that you join Mayday. And there's out at the front table, there's a brochure like this, and it's not expensive to join the organization. Now, we'll have, if I don't lose this, we'll have this book available. I didn't bring many copies. We have it both in Swedish, sorry, not Danish, Swedish and English. And I haven't done the translation in my mind as to how much it costs. We also have a DVD that you can pick up that explains more about Codex. It's just 10 minutes long, but it might be useful for your education. And go to our website, write this down, thenhf.com. thenhf.com. Sign up on our email list. You can make donations there. We take them from all over the world. It helps us go to the Codex meetings and fight for you. I also recommend that you go to the Mayday site, mayday-info.dk. That would be important, and I think you can sign up through the Mayday website as well. And they're also on Facebook, so look for them on Facebook. Summary: don't trust the government for information or solutions. Don't trust the mass media for information. Don't trust medicine for health. Do join like-minded people, which hopefully will be Mayday and NHF. And never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And when you're trying to do all this, I don't like quoting this person, but he did say one good thing. He said, what convinces is conviction. Believe in the argument you're advancing. If you don't, you're as good as dead. The other person will sense that something isn't there, and no chain of reasoning, no matter how logical or elegant or brilliant, will win your case for you. In other words, speak from the heart. When we speak at Codex meetings, you know, we really speak qualitatively different than the other delegates, because the other delegates are mostly paid to be there. We aren't. We do it from philosophical grounding in freedom and health and things that are organic, and from a heartfelt belief that what we're doing is what is really right, and knowledge in that. So you want to walk a path with heart. Brandon Lee said this to me. I met him before he died, and this is something that he said to me, and I give it back to you. And so the perfect day, go to bed with a dream and wake up with a purpose. So I charge all of you to help make a difference and help make this a better world. Thank you.